yacht. I want him to think that me hot. I show him a track and he not. I think we are on, but we not. Oh, side, waiting on this on my life. I was fake fly Pidgeot. Pokemon references should have less of them. I feel pessimistic. Really so lame, how I got a dame. I must have put a hex on misses. Screw it up, I need slow-mo emphasis. No more road managing, no more internships. Live in water, heat rained on me. Raised by the sun, that's photosynthesis. Wanna roll with the tribe, you can find us riding the beat. Rise in the east like sun, no fun. Last year kinda felt like climbing a tree. The higher it seems, more cuts on my knees. Look down.
All right, everyone. The timer went down to 0. I think I'm not wrong for interpreting that means it's time to start. If I were to look at the audience out here, that would not be a great indicator that it's time to start. I wasn't going to say anything, but since I have to stall for all of you to come in, I'm going to say some things. First of all, yes, you in the men's bathroom, I know you can hear me because I was in there and know there are speakers in there. Please hurry up, wash your hands appropriately, come into the session. Hey, if you led a workshop today, I just want to thank you for doing that. And yeah, if you're on the live stream, there are 18 people in the room that are also thanking the people who gave workshops. And if you gave a workshop and it was it wasn't well attended, the ones I just want you to know that it wasn't that people were choosing to be at other people's workshops. They were choosing to be in the courtyard talking. There are a lot of 2-person tables out there, and I didn't even know that was an option. And I'm supposed to tell you what the options are. So, okay, I've stalled. We talked through in the order service how much time everything would take, and I was supposed to not go that long. I get to introduce someone to speak of the power of summer. Actually, a few people, but I'm going to just introduce one person to start. I forgot one thing. Alan said that you need to be in this room because you need to. If you're not in this room right now, you're the people that need to hear what's about to be talked about. And Alan offered $1,000 from Jason Bennett's support account to be raffled off for people who are in the room. Okay. The person who's going to come up and take the microphone from me, I want to tell you 2 things about them that you really need to know. One, I work with this person in Ann Arbor, and I want you to know they do so much work behind the scenes. I get to have conversations with them every once in a while and hear the work that they're putting in on a collegiate level to help support and bless all of these churches. And it's so much unseen. Like, a lot of you probably have no idea how much work is going in and how it's blessing your church. So it'd be good to give them a hand in a minute when they come up. And the second thing you need to know about them is that if Mark Wahlberg and Matt Damon had a baby, it would be this man. Please welcome up National Director of Collegiate Church Network, Jason Bennett.
Thanks. Thank you. We are talking about the power of summer, and we have a huge program that can harness that. We've used it for years and years, and we as Collegiate are at a place where, having talked to the board and looking at our organization, our movement, where we are, we want to double down on LT. And so this past summer, one of the things that I got to do was I wanted to go and look and see these LTs for myself, because I'd actually never been to an LT. I came from outside the movement with other ministries growing up. And so I got the opportunity, took my family, and went to Estes Park for a week. And then the very next week, turned around and went to ADK, which was really cool to see them back to back. Amazing locations, amazing programs, both of them. The staff there are incredible. Had tons of conversations. As I said before, the books that Todd has, which you can still buy, he is going to fly out tomorrow, so tonight's your opportunity to buy for those, was what sparked enthusiasm in me. And then the other thing was going to these LTs and actually interacting with some of you as leaders and then the students who were there in those programs. It was super powerful. I was envisioned with the power of LT and what I think specifically fits where we are as a movement in terms of we need to continue to raise up new staff and leaders, and it's a huge opportunity to mobilize college students for God's kingdom, whether they join our movement, as was said earlier, or they end up in other movements or even missions. It's a huge opportunity. So we're super excited to continue to lean into that. When we collect, it's called Critical Success Indicator. CSI data from all the churches, so the boards know about this. It's a bunch of different metrics and stuff put together years ago, and we gather that every single year to look and see, is any changes, what's notable. And I will say the most notable thing in the data this year from all the churches was that there's a downtrend in seeing new staff in our churches across the board. And we actually went back to Reliant and said, well, wait, what's different? A lot of our churches are now doing intern-based starts. So like you intern, you try it out. If it's a good fit, you come on staff. I was like, well, maybe interns are up. They are up, but not enough to like show that it's a plateau or compensating for the decrease. It was already going down a little bit. The pandemic actually accelerated that. So we're at a place where we definitely need to continue to church plant, to have healthy churches and stabilize both those who have sent or planting. We do want new staff, and as was mentioned multiple times today, which weren't those talks this afternoon awesome? So good. The idea that we can equip students for ministry, whether that's with us or beyond, mobilizing to vocational ministry. So we see LT as a huge part of that. Summers are one of the most strategic seasons for staff sustainability, in staff sticking around, having vision. I've talked to multiple here that were at LT, and I said, what was one of the highlights? And it was kind of like they just got re-envisioned around what they do and why they do it. And recruitment. Last year, Chad stood in front of everyone in the circle, in the round, and said, how many of you are on staff where LT played a part in that? And it was like over 70% of the staff we have were impacted by LT. And so had awesome experiences at both LTs, got to ride in the mountains, the Trail Ridge Road. We had a Jeep, took the top off, the doors off, took my family up to 12,000 feet, driving that windy road where there's no door. It's like a roller coaster. Super epic, ton of fun. We get to 80K, and I find that there's, on Lake George, you can sail their boats, and if you pass the sail test, you're in it for life. I'm like, challenge accepted. Haven't sailed since high school. I'm in. So I was like, what's the worst? I'll fail, and they'll tell me I got to take a class. So I got out there, tipped it on the first turn where you weren't supposed to tip it, got it right back, made it through the course, did it the right place. That earned me the right to take my kids out on the sailboat, which was my goal. I was like, I want to take one of my kids out sailing. And so my son said, yeah, I'll do this. And the first day at the camp, we did the jumping off the rock into the lake, and my son was scared of the water. Like, he got off the boat, swam straight to the rock, and then jumped in the water and went right back to the boat. It was like rock or boat. He didn't want to be in the water. And I said, hey, we can go sail today. Would you want to go? And he says, yeah. I said, here's the worst that'll happen. We'll turn, and the boat will flip over. And we'll have to get out of the boat, and you'll kind of just swim in the water. I'll flip it back over. We'll get in the boat, and we'll continue on. He's like, okay, thinking that's not going to happen. Sure enough, I go out. First turn coming back, wind hits just right, boat is going, and I'm like, I can't grab the rope, the rudder's off. I'm like, I either try to save this, and he'll probably still fall out, or I let the boat go, and I grab my son. So the boat is going, I let go of everything, I grab his life vest, and I'm looking at him, and I said, we're going in. And his eyes get like this big. And he's like, oh my word, the boat goes over. And once the sail hits, it kind of slows down, so you have time to get out away from the ropes. So we swim out, he's like, and then I'm like, I got to get this boat back over. So I take him and I just push him away, and I'm like, stay there. I'm going to flip it. So we flip it back over, and he's like looking around. I get him back in the boat, and then we sail on, and I'm thinking, this is either going to be coming up in his therapy down the road, or God could use this. And we get going, and we're talking, and he's like, I said, do you want to go back, or do you want to keep going? I want to keep going. And sure enough, he ends up telling me later, he goes, I'm not afraid of the water anymore. He flipped in the deepest part of the lake. The next day, we went to the rock. He jumped out of the boat, was either in the water or on the rock the entire hour we were swimming there. Not afraid of the water. And this is actually a picture of what LT does for students, because LT gives you opportunity to get ministry reps and realize that they can swim too. Did you catch that? They realize they can do ministry and that God can work and use them. It's a huge opportunity. That's why we love the power of LT. We want to lean into it further. And so there's been a lot of talk over the years about LT and what is there. There's magic. You know, it's like, what happens there? I don't know. It's awesome. Great mountains, great location. God does cool stuff. And you're like, well, what do you have to like prove that? We weren't strong on that side other than some anecdotal stories. But we know God works because when you look, there's like so many people in ministry as a result in some way of LT. So what we did is we have a guy named Ryan Cozy, Dr. Ryan Cozy, who has a spiritual formation missional behavior survey, which we're giving to our churches. And we said, hey, could you adapt this for LT and implement it in a summer? He did that. He put it in motion at both LTs this summer. We test on the front end, we test on the back end, so test 1, test 2, and then 6 months out, we're gonna test again and see what changes have happened. What's interesting is he said that the subset environment of LT marked growth in spiritual formation and engagement with the lost. Not just anecdotally. Like he said, there is marked improvement from time 1 to time 2. And time 3 is coming. Not only marked improvement in ministry skills, but also in life skills. And he said, it's also the only place that he has measured in the United States, which was in Estes Park 1, where the average person saw at least one person come to see Christ in a given time span. He said that doesn't mean a lot to some people. For him, it's huge. He has not seen that happen in any test category across the country. LT works. It is powerful for spiritual formation and missional behavior. And so as we looked at LT, we've been gathering since there. We have a summit. There's been tons of leadership and time. You're going to hear more about that from Alan and Chad in just a minute. One of the things that we worked on was how can we harness LT? And one of the things Ryan Cozy talks about is clarity. Having common language and clarity creates momentum because you understand what we're trying to do. And so we've done a ton of work taking the goals, the mission, all this stuff, and rehammering it down to having clarity around what we're doing. One of the biggest questions with LT has been, how is it leadership focused? We know it's discipleship, but how is it leadership? That's always been a question. Actually, Lauren Willem hit it on the head earlier. Leadership is serving. And so at LTs, we are now going to implement an ethos for the LT programs, which is to serve like Jesus with others. The ethos of LT is to serve like Jesus with others. That if you don't come on staff with us, you don't do anything else, but you leave the LT program, maybe you never even come back to our church. And in your head is, leadership is to serve like Jesus with others. If that's in your head, that is a win for the kingdom. And when you break that down to serve, leadership is serving. Lauren told us that earlier. Like Jesus, leadership is character-based. We heard about this afternoon. And with others, leadership is interdependent. That's how we lead our churches, and we can teach that in LT, frame the whole experience, and then from there, we get into spiritual formation, missional behavior, some of the other goals and expectations. And so, super excited about the clarity, the work that's been done. And I want to pass this off. Please welcome Alan.
All hail to the orange. Number 16, 14, or 13, Illinois, depending on how you think about it. I think it's the third best Big Ten team here in, third best, highest ranked team in Collegiate right now. Potentially highest ranked based on expectations. So, ILL. Let's go. Okay. You guys ready for this? This is the big reveal. Man, I should have sent you guys those as images instead of as slides. I knew you didn't have my fonts. Okay, so these slides, this is to walk you guys through the sheet that you have. If you're like a handout person, that's great. If you're a screen person, it's going to be great. I'm going to walk you through clarity for LT, and I love clarity. I'm not good at it, but I love it because it offers us something to shoot for. It offers us something to do. And so the clarity I want to offer you, can you guys go to the next slide on this? The clarity that we're going to offer is that, can we get the nice picture with the mountains and the this is what we're doing. LT, best summer ever. Clarity. How many of you have said this, like to promote LT to students? Yeah, enough of you that I'm uncomfortable with it. Here's the thing. LT is awesome, and Jay said it's incredible, but it's not enough to say it's the best summer ever. So we needed help. And so what we did, Jay mentioned this, I'm just going to rehash it, is that we wanted to give language to what we know about LT already. And so some of this is going to be like an Apple product reveal. Like they took something that Android did for years and years and then just clarified it and made it good. And so this is what we're doing today. And so we're going to give language to what we know, and then we're going to shape it into what it should be. Okay, because sometimes each of these programs, they have been amazing, but we need some shaping to make sure it's doing what we want it to do. So we've been in these Zoom calls over the few weeks. I just want to point out, LT needed help, like Jay's tab management. This is do you guys see those tabs? All the time? This is a discipleship issue, you guys. Now, here's what I'm going to say to you before we get into this sheet, is the people that need to hear this are out there. Their leaders are out there, okay? And so you're going to bring this to them and tell them, LT is not just the best summer ever. You're going to say what it is, and you're going to be able to offer that clarity. Because I think a summer used in this way is one of the ways we've developed staff for our program. We develop global missionaries, and we help people who are going to go be engineers and bankers and doctors do that as a Christian. That's why we work a job at our LTs and don't just do a summer program where you don't work a job, because we think it's a huge part of training people to walk with Jesus for the rest of their life. So here's what LT is. This is one we had last year. So if you've seen this, great. But leadership training is a summer program devoted to serving collegiate local churches, that's you guys, in the discipleship and leadership development of college students, ministry leaders, and future church planters. We agreed upon that last year, and then we weren't sure what else we were going to talk about. Because it's hard, right? Because we know you guys do discipleship and leadership development throughout the year. And so what can a program in the summer necessarily offer? Well, I think it offers it because it's in the context of a job. It offers it in the context of a life internship where you're walking with Jesus in a different place than you're used to. And I think it's really powerful that it does that. So we knew this much. And then we started talking in those Zoom calls with that stressful amount of tabs, and we moved forward to talk about this ethos of LT. Oh, sorry, no, let's talk about this. Let's go on one more. Sorry, I had another thing. So this is what it is. This is how it breaks down. Leadership training is a summer program. Great, we're going to make sure it happens in the summer. Devoted to serving collegiate churches. That's you guys. Discipleship and leadership development. That's what we want to do. And then the constituency is college students, ministry leaders, and future church planners. And so what we did in our meetings is we asked questions related to these things. Can we go to that one? Is it a summer program? Check. Nailed it. Got it. How are we serving collegiate? We think we're serving collegiate by developing leaders, but we're going to talk about that a little bit more. What discipleship leadership development? There's so much we could do. It's hard to cover everything in the summer. It's hard to cover everything in 4 years, but what do we want to do at LT? And then lastly, what about those audiences need help? What is unique about each of those audiences of students, ministry leaders, and future church planters? Does this make sense? Okay. So we went on. We said it's a summer program. We're serving collegiate churches by offering this for collegiate churches. Those two were easy. So what are we going to do for leadership and discipleship? We said discipleship, surprise, it's about Jesus. Yeah, come on. And that means we are not making disciples of Chad or Matt or Jay or any of you guys. We're making disciples of Jesus. So imitate me as I imitate Christ. And so if we're going to talk about leadership, we also have to talk about Jesus. And so discipleship and leadership development is rooted in Jesus. Is this surprising? No. So we landed on this ethos, to serve like Jesus with others. That's what LT is. That's the ethos of LT. And we talked about there are 3 leadership principles that are underneath that. The first is that leadership is serving. Thank you, Lauren, for that. Seriously. Guys, if we're going to talk this, we have to start walking this. I love this. Like we have representatives from our YMCAs here. I don't know if you guys know the partner YMCAs at Silver Bay. They're Adirondack LT and the Estes Park Center, Estes Park LT. And I heard this. It was amazing. So Carolyn, are you in here? She might have already left. She's out there. Okay. So Carolyn, she's like the whatever she is at, I don't even know her title there, but she's had every title there. And can I tell you, I was so floored. She said, every time we're understaffed for a banquet or a thing like that, I am washing dishes. And I just thought, how many of us as leaders, when we reach a higher point, a higher position, would say, I'm going to go sit with that freshman? Are we willing to do that? Are we really willing to serve? Are we willing to give our time in the way that even our program partners that are they're not on the same mission we are with the clarity we are, they're serving. Let's do it. Let's serve like Jesus, okay? Leadership is character-based. We've talked about that as well, Lauren. Like we talked about, we want to make sure leadership is going to be about developing our character and then our skills. And so if any of you have ever felt like, LT, I don't know if it's doing anything, well, it's doing this. It's doing character formation. And if you get through that, then we'll talk about the leadership development. But you don't ever get through that. You just get through it enough, And then leadership is interdependent. It's why we've moved to having our programs having shared leadership really explicitly, shared directors. Chad and I are sharing LT national directing. We want to share things and believe because we are interdependent with one another. We don't just want to talk it, we want to live it. And so that's what in our groups and things like that, there's going to be opportunities to share leadership. And so this ethos and these principles shape the culture through which the objectives of LT are achieved. So you think about this. We have a mission statement. This is what it is. The ethos is how we're starting to do that. And then the objectives really are what we're talking about when we talk about discipleship and leadership development. And these objectives have two imperatives. They're simply this: to lead yourself and to serve others. Self-leadership is really important. I think we've seen it time and time again in the American church, that people need to actually walk with Jesus themselves if they're going to lead other people to Jesus. And so self-leadership is the first thing. So we want to take students from your churches that we are stewarding in these summer programs and help them learn to lead themselves in a different context. We have some tools for that. Let's talk about that. So self-leadership, growing in personal devotion to Jesus is the first thing. So we're going to talk about personal devotion. The programs each year might look a little different how they do this, depending on what the needs are, depending on how mature the group is based on that survey, things like that. But the goal is to help people start to grow in personal devotion, their own walk with Jesus. Give them the tools to not just sit with the verse of the day, but to study, as Christina mentioned. To really dig in with God's word, to have the sense of how to have an answer when our hope is asked of, why we have it. And then we're going to talk about growing in Christ-like character. Not just saying, hey, leadership is character-based, but we're going to actually talk about it. That means living in accountability. Those of you who've been to LT, you probably lived in those life groups or accountability groups and shared your life. And for the first time, you felt different about it because it was like a different context. You went deeper and shared deeper, and the opportunity to grow in your character in a new and fresh way. We want to repeat that again and again at LTs. And lastly, we want to help people as they lead themselves to explore their spiritual gifting, how God has made them to serve in the church. And so right away, if somebody says, hey, what am I going to do at LT? You can tell them this. It's going to be on the LT website, collegiate.church/leadership training. It's there under the About LT section. This stuff is there. Because we want to offer clarity as to what LT is. It's not just magic. It's not just awesome. It is those things, but we're giving some clarity to it. Then as you start to lead yourself, we want to offer opportunities to serve others. That's our next imperative. And so serving others looks like developing a steward's mindset. And I really, really believe in this one. Like, the reality is you guys are working, if your LTers are working a full-time job, and oftentimes because hospitality industry is understaffed, a more than full-time job, which is great because they can make more money working time and a half, but they also have the opportunity to steward the responsibility God has given them. To be willing to take their time and use it to serve, to be willing to take their money and think about it in a kingdom-oriented way. Time, talent, resources. We ask for that in our support appointments. Let's train students to be thinking about those things in our churches and specifically in our LT programs. We want people to have clarity on how to share the gospel and their grace story. Now, you guys do that stuff. I know you do that stuff. We do that stuff at Illini Life, number 14 in the nation, Illinois. But we want to continue to give opportunities to practice that and see it in a new context and to contextualize the gospel to internationals who work at our YMCAs, people who are less than savory like all the really goody two-shoes college students at your universities, people who are working these seasonal jobs who are just different, contextualizing the gospel in relationship in those contexts. And then we want to help people gain a global and missionary mindset. We want to help your LTers get that. And what we mean by that is to help them start thinking about it's not just Collegiate, although I would love for them to work with Collegiate, but to see that the kingdom of God is at hand. And we want them to think about how they participate in it, whether in their own service or they're making a lot of money and giving to the kingdom. Maybe both. Does that make sense? This is LT. This is what we're doing. It's that simple. And I feel like we've had different opportunities where we said this is really great and we've had different clarity and things like that. This is our clarity now. This is not just for this year. This is what we're doing going forward. Now, that gets us the first part of this model. It answers, what about discipleship and leadership development? You can be confident that if you send somebody to LT, the goal is for them to grow in these areas, which should not be super surprising because they match up really nicely to the spiritual health survey that our churches are doing. You see, we're building movement momentum, building clarity with language. But what about the audiences that need help? And this is a question we got. We had an LT lunch with some of the reps from your campuses, and they asked, who's LT for? That's a great question. So we said it in the mission statement, right? Student leaders, or college students, ministry leaders, and future church planters. And so let's start talking about those, college students. I think there are two primary audiences of college students here for us. They're the first-time LTers. They're the people who are like, yeah, I'll go. I'll do that. They're often a freshman. They're often somebody who hasn't done a ton of spiritual formation, but they're willing to go. You see some potential in them. We don't want them to be a mess. In fact, our assessment process for LT, I don't know if you knew this, you can't register for LT. You can only apply for LT because we assess to make sure, is LT a good fit for this person or not? We want to work with the local church on that and help make sure the right people get there. You can recruit people, but if their life's a mess, it's probably not going to be the best spot for them. But go ahead and ask. Ask them to go. Ask them if the clarity we've offered on this sheet is what they want to grow in this summer. Not just, you want to have an excellent summer. That helps. Hiking Long's Peak is really cool, but it's not the only thing you do. So for these first-time LTers, we want them to embody the ethos of LT, and we want them to grow in the 2 imperatives and 6 objectives. That's what we want them to do. That's the base LT experience. And what I love about that is it doesn't stop with them. This is everybody's LT experience, from first-time LTer to first-time staffer to directors. Everyone should be doing this. We don't graduate from this. Now, what about student leaders? We have something else for them. We want them to embody the ethos. We want them to grow in the imperatives. And we want to have them experience creating and lead environments and leading others in these environments. So create the environments and lead people in those environments. What that means simply is we want them to learn to lead their peers. We want them to start practicing, well, I'm doing this, now I'm going to help you do this too. Does that make sense? That's what a student leader can expect at LT. So if you're sending maybe somebody for their second time, or if you're like, hey, we want them to lead a group, or we want them to lead a different ministry, the goal is that they would be starting to multiply their life already into other people. They wouldn't just be a disciple at LT, but they'd be starting to make disciples as a leader of others by serving them, by being interdependent on them. Does this make sense? Okay. Now, this is a piece that's we've had a lot of discussion about this, and so I think this is going to continually evolve, but here's what I know. LT for me as a staff person was a massive component of my development as a staff person. Because I got to see churches that were different than my own. I got to lead in different ways that I might not have been able to in my local church. I got to hear you guys do that, and we do that, and we got to cross-pollinate as a movement. Because the reality is we work better when we're together as a movement, not separate independent churches, I think. And so LT is a great way for staff to develop too, ministry leaders. Sometimes it's a staff person, sometimes it's that teacher who says, hey, I've got a free summer, I'm going to come out. I love serving in this church. I want to do that. So let's talk about those ministry leaders, huh? Can we go to that next one? Okay. So we want them to embody the ethos, we want them to grow in the imperatives, but then we want to offer personal development, devotional development. Here's the thing. When you talk about being a staff person, so often it feels like, hey, by the time you're on staff, your devotional life is probably like fine. Let's check in on that with each other. Let's build a program that allows staff to develop their devotional life with God too. It already kind of happens because the mountains and the lake are magic, but let's actually talk about it. We've talked about skill development in areas that you are good at already and training other people to do. Like maybe you have a kick butt soundboard runner. Somebody knows how to run sound like crazy. You get a chance to train other people in that, train other staff in that. Maybe you have somebody who you want to learn a role from your church, and you don't have the time to teach them, or you don't have the skills in your church for them to learn it. Great, send them to LT, free staff development. It's awesome. It's also, I think, a career catalyst, because as you start to see other people in the movement, you start to think about, oh, that's a cool thing that they're doing. I wonder if I could do that someday. Oh my gosh, I love the idea of church planting. These guys are having a ton of fun. I love the idea of being a sending church because it looks like they're having way more fun, or stable, or whatever. For many of us, being in our rhythms of campus get kind of old after a few years. Fall, Thanksgiving break, winter break, spring break, just over and over again. And so LT offers a change of pace and place. Changing your ministry service location really helps sometimes re-inject energy into your home location. And the pace of LT is just different. There's some intensity at the start. It feels a little bit like a church plant at times. But there's also some steadiness throughout. There's opportunity to get away. It's a good chance for you as a leader, as a pastor, to send your staff person to know that the directors of these programs are going to steward them well and care for them well. And they want to work with you on it. They don't just want to be like, hey, thanks for the staff person to run the program. That's not helpful. But how can we serve one another? And then lastly, collegiate connections. How many of you were excited to come to this conference because you were on staff at LT and met somebody, like you knew people and you want to come now? It's massive. It's massive to know people in the movement. And so I think it's huge for us as staff members and ministry leaders to do so. Now, this is where clarity just requires a bit of time still. We talked about that future church planters. Let me talk about that. Let's go to the on church planters slide. There's a lot of words here. What I'm really, this is bad slide design, guys. I'm just acknowledging it. It's terrible. It's terrible. Here's the deal. We believe that LT can be a catalyst to church planting. And Matthew McClure wrote a bunch of big seminary Michigan words about it that nobody read. But here's the deal. We believe that LT is a catalyst to inviting people to become staff in our movement, as Jay was talking about, but also to invite people to think about church planting. As we see what other churches are doing, as we see the possibilities. LT kind of functions like a church plant, but it is not a program to develop church planters. It's a way just to serve people who are kind of thinking about that. Does that make sense? So it's not taking on the burden of saying, hey, this is how you plant a church. It's just saying, hey, if you're doing that, the natural rhythms of LT are going to kind of expose that and give you a chance to see a bit of that. Okay, let's go to our questions. I think we answered them. Okay? Yeah. One other piece on here, I skipped it just because I didn't have a spot to put in my model on the slides, but we want to talk with LT participants about ministry. We do staff recruiting time, but we've talked about kind of an exit time, an exit week at LT. That's still very much so in work, so I feel like I can't even promise it, but like an exit week where we talk about some of these things. Like, hey, you're going to feel down because your campus isn't as cool as the mountains. You're going to feel down because not everybody is as in on Jesus when you go back home. Let's talk about that. Let's also talk about how maybe a summer like this is inspiring to think about a career in ministry or inspiring to think about supporting people in ministry. We want to talk about that with LTers because we think that's just a natural outflow of the program. The last bit of clarity I want to give you guys, and this is what we're just trying to work on to offer more and more clarity, is the philosophy of ministry of LT is to do something. If you guys have done huddles with 3DM, you've seen this language before, but to impart information in teaching settings, our large group settings, some of our community group times, where something is being taught. Does that make sense? Information is being transferred. Once information has been transferred, or as it's being transferred, we start to talk about apprenticeship settings where imitation happens. Hey, you seem like somebody who could also lead this team. Would you be interested in learning what I do? You want to talk about it this summer? We've only got 8 weeks, so let's dive in right now. Let's go. Let's apprentice this. Then we talk about innovation. Some of our student leaders and some of our staff, you guys are going to have the opportunity to just do something just totally unfettered. Just go, innovate, make it better for a summer, and then take that back home and continue to do so. And so that's the goal, is we really don't want to impart information. We want to talk about apprenticeship and imitation happening, and then we're going to pass that on to innovate it and make it their own, in their own context, and hopefully send them back to your campuses even more ready to serve in their local context. Does this make sense to you guys? This is the clarity that I've craved for a lot of years. I'm deeply excited about this. I'm excited to say this is what LT is to that freshman who's an engineer and thinks they have to get 3 summers of internships. No, you can do this. This is going to be good for your life. So what's next? First off, if you feel like your church hasn't done it, recommit to LT. Send some staff. Tell Kevin Cody, Mark Gonzalez, Gens, and Crystal Poff, who are directing at Estes and ADK, that you want to send staff to their program. Make them have to tell people no. Make them make that uncomfortable discussion have to happen because you are so ready to send staff to be developed. They can tell you no. Don't say no for them. If you think it's worth it for your staff to go, say, I think it'd be worth it for them to go. Recruit students with this model in mind. Tell them this is what this summer's going to be about for you. Every year is different, but we have this kind of clarity. Do you want to jump in on this? This is LT whatever 0.0, but it's a new version number, and we're ready to go with it. You want to jump in on this? So we're gonna execute our first summer based on this ethos. And I'm working with coaching these directors and helping them think through it and make sure it's not just fun words on a page or a slide, but real practical information, imitation, and innovation happening. And then we're gonna build on that momentum. We're gonna come back here, not to Texas, sorry, but somewhere colder, and we're gonna talk about it. And we're gonna continue to build on that momentum for the future. Now, some of you might not be sure about it. I know some of you aren't because you're like, it takes away from us, it takes away from other things. I have a really sweet deal for you. And Chad's gonna talk about it. You guys welcome up Chad Frank.
What's up, everybody? Yeah, I'm Chad Frank. I am the H2O region, and as the news was dropped by Alan, I'm the newly LT National co-director. I got demoted a week ago to Alan, co-director there, which I'm okay. But some of you guys may be asking, how did that happen? That's news. Maybe I don't know if that was shocking, but it's news. But well, there's a couple answers. First of all, we made Alan agree to a few things, and I think there's a picture here that helps. There's other things, but we'll unpack that later. You can come see me. But Alan, just remember, it's coming. But in all seriousness, Alan's just been doing a phenomenal job behind the scenes. Many other people, Crystal Poff, Gens, the Codys as a team. There's a ton of people, the Gonzalez, there's just tons of people that have put a lot of work into making LT it's going to be the best yet. We're absolutely convinced it's going to be the best yet. And many people have been doing this hurrahs, some yay girls going on here, and it's about LT because of the previous, what you've experienced. We're convinced it's going to be the best summer yet. And because of that, we have 2 requests for you guys. 2 requests. One is going to apply to everyone in this room, and then the second is going to apply just to a segment. But the first one that we want to apply to everyone in this room, because LT is going to be the best summer yet, we want you guys to consider recruiting like you've never before. Recruiting for this particular summer like you've never before. And not just recruiting anyone. We're not just looking for bodies. Alan alluded to this, but LT, and you've noticed this shift hopefully in the last couple years, LT is not for everybody. It's not a place for your students to be evangelized. It's also not a great place for them to heal. LT is meant for leaders or potential ones. But would you consider giving yourself for this coming summer in the recruitment of leaders and potential leaders in your church? I know that half this room, maybe 3/4, maybe 90% of this room is already there, but just wants help doing so. And if that's you, we wanted to let you know we got some resources for you, both of which are in the Collegiate Vault. All of us have access to that. If you don't know, just ask somebody what we can get you into the College Vault. And there's 2 particular things. One, there's just media resources, stuff for Instagrams, videos, you name it. Secondly, we created this doc called simply Recruiting for LT at a Local Church. And in it, it's got like timelines, it's got some phraseology, it's just got some general philosophy and how to get people to LT. And we want you to take a look at that. But before I sit down, I want to highlight two things from that particular document. One, please move it from a task of a few individuals to a church-wide endeavor. Can you, maybe even at this conference, or at the very least next week during your staff meeting, come together as a staff team, and how are we going to get our best students to LT this summer? And come with it from a team mentality. But then secondly is follow-up. This isn't rocket science, but we found that just individual follow-up is huge in the recruitment of LT, and I want to challenge you guys. As you saw Alan unpack what we want this summer and future summers to look like, I believe that there's at least a student, maybe two students that kind of came to your mind like, man, it'd be awesome if they got to experience this. And if that's you, I want you to just even now, if it didn't come to your mind right now, who are two students back home that you're convinced would have a phenomenal summer at LT? Two students. And those two students, I want to challenge each one of us to, between now and Thanksgiving break, to sit down with those two students and cast a vision. Have a conversation of what they can invest their summer with. Because we found that November is actually, I was talking to Joe Testa, November is actually one of the more strategic times to recruit for LT, because if you can get a few students going to LT in November, December, it creates some momentum for your church. Plus, they don't know what they're doing this summer, so we can be the first one to kind of plant an idea in their brain. They can go back on Thanksgiving break, talk to their family, get back from that, and boom, you got some momentum for LT all of a sudden. So for each of us, would you consider having a conversation with two students, each one of us in this room, about investing their summer for the Lord? So that's the first request for everybody. The second request I have for you guys, because again, we believe this is going to be the best summer yet. It's designed for people who are, well, it's the senior leaders in this room. Level 4 and higher, particularly those of you who are level 4 and higher and maybe aren't necessarily as emphatic about LT as maybe Alan and I. And just so you know, that's actually an okay posture. I'm okay with some little bit of skepticism about LT, because I think in a lot of ways it's wise. Because I know a lot of us in this room, us old fuddy-duddies, it's been years since we've experienced LT. We remember just some vague memories of us being impacted, but it's been years since we've been there. In fact, there's a lot of people, we said 70% went to an LT in this room. That's 30% have never have. And that's a significant number. And if that describes you, if you're a senior level leader in this room, and it's been years, and maybe it's been never that you've been to an LT, we want you to come and see. Because we've referenced testimonies of people in this room and people back home in the last half hour. We've also alluded to research that we've done with Dr. Cozy about just the benefits and the proof that LT is what we say it's going to be. But we get it. I know Jesus got it. When the initial disciples were just kind of getting an idea that Jesus was someone special. You guys remember the story? They kind of approached him, two of the disciples approached him and were trying to ask him some questions, and Jesus' response was, come and see. Come and experience. And we'd like to provide you a similar opportunity and through something we're calling LT Refresh. LT Refresh is a 1-week experience that we're trying to carve out for 2 senior staff leaders in every church to be able to come out and experience what LT is about at Silver Bay or Estes Park. And during this LT Refresh, we're going to give these 2 leaders from each of your guys' churches an opportunity to experience in all the events that LT offers, main sessions, team days, intern time, staff times, you name it. You're going to have the opportunity to enter into the rhythms of the local staff and kind of get their perspective on how the summer is impacting them. You're also going to have the opportunity to interact with the local the YMCA leadership and get their perspective on how the dynamic of LT is impacting their programs. And lastly, you can be refreshed. It's not going to be a packed schedule. It's not going to be a vacation, but it's not going to be a packed schedule. There's going to be room for some downtime, for hikes, for alone time with the Lord, and interact with some of your students. Because this LT Refresh is going to be designed to refresh your knowledge about and, Lord willing, appreciation of what God does in and through LT, but we also want you to walk away refreshed as well. Some of you guys are saying that sounds great, but it sounds expensive. And that's the best part. Well, no. We've already referenced that there's two YMCA representatives here, Melissa from Estes and Carolyn from Silver Bay. And when we have the opportunity to pitch the idea to them, we want to do this LT refresh. There's senior leaders in our movement that haven't had the opportunity to experience an LT in a number of years, and we feel like, man, they would really be envisioned by doing so. You know what they concluded? They should go for free. Free, people. And one thing I know about missionaries, we like free. And so that is what the offer is going to be. You guys are going to have the opportunity to spend a week at one of these resorts free of cost. Food and lodging is going to be covered. Now, you still got to get there. But we have two different requests to two different entities to contribute $500 to your church to help cover those travel costs to get to LT. So Lord willing, it will actually be free, but we won't know that for another month, so stay tuned. More details to come. But I'd be bummed if I got off the stage and didn't highlight this. The two representatives from the Y, they're in our midst. They actually have a table right outside there. They came on their own dime. They're so committed to our partnership and coming alongside our students that when they were presented with the opportunity, they on their own dime, of course, from the YMCA, flew them out here. And honestly, if you have an opportunity, please go stop by them and thank them for coming here today, let alone providing this opportunity for our leaders. So please do that. Yes, put your hands together. But yeah, they're going to be here for until lunch tomorrow. So please take advantage of them being here if you have any questions about the Y and your summer experience for the students. But more details to come, but the last two details we want to make sure you are aware is the dates. You can't just show up to Estes or Silver Bay at any time you want. We have them carved out, some reservation spots for you. So write this down now, because this is what we're orienting our summer around. If your school is tied to Estes Park, it's going to be June 4th through the 10th. That's the opportunity to get there. If your school is going to be tied to ADK, those are the dates, June 26th to July 1st. So there it is. We're convinced this summer is going to be the best summer yet. And because of that, our two requests. One, to recruit for LT like you never had before as individuals and as a church. Then secondly, freeing up two of your senior leaders to spend a week at LT Refresh this summer. So that's what we have for you guys. I really appreciate your time. I'm going to pray, and we're going to transition. Father God, I know I'm convinced, I know many in this room are convinced that you can change lives in one summer. You can change the trajectory of a student's life, families' lives, generations based on one summer. And we just pray that you would do that in our midst this coming summer. Lord, we just give you our plans. We give you the people that you've entrusted to us, and we just ask that you would do amazing things in and through us and in and through LT. We pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right, thank you, Chad. And thank you, Alan, as well. Personally, as someone who has invited people to LT on the basis of it truly is the best summer ever, I am both grateful for the wonderful equipping on more practical information I can share with people, and mind blown at imagining how this summer could be even better than the best summers ever that I have experienced, including, just to round out some comments I've made earlier, the summer of 2019 that I met a woman who's looking at me and knows where this is going. I met a woman named Brooke Davis who, she and I, never would have guessed, We crossed paths on staff at LT. We went on a hike to Estes Cone and emerged from that hike as best friends for life, and not like to the exclusion of other best friends, but like to the magnitude of at least matching tattoos. So I am just thrilled for the summers that countless of us in this room have ahead of us. If this speaks to like the power of the gospel, not only is our friendship evidence of like the love that we can have through Jesus and like the good times we can have through LT, but she is one of those Ohio friends, and I feel like this is just an opportunity while I have all your attention to say that like, man, like the gospel is real because it can bring people together from even the most unlikely of circumstances. So I know, like I bash, but like my Ohio friends, Columbus included, like you are wonderful people, and I do have a true love for you. So I'm grateful that our friendships, like our friendships can go deeper than school rivalries, and I do truly cherish each and every one of you, just like off the football field. So that's all I wanted to at least round that out and say that we are brothers and sisters in Christ, and that is bigger than our rivalries. And I'm grateful for this space that like has that. Nowhere else in the world outside the church are you going to get that sort of thing. Am I right? Can I get an amen? Yeah. So anyway, that's my little aside, but it is now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. You might have remembered him from all the way back years ago or this morning. I think it was actually this morning. That he shared with us the first 300 years of the church, and now we get to hear the last 300 years of the church. If you'd like to hear about what was in between that, you can probably read a book. So join me in welcoming back Todd.
Wow, thank you so much. Hey, appreciate both you guys for buying my book. It meant a lot. You don't know how that feels. Thank you too. 100% of all proceeds go to needy children in my home. And you guys need to get better, I'll tell you this, man. Last chance after I'm done here, bookstore's gone, okay? So, I want to share with you the ministry we started 22 years ago. It's called the Traveling Team. And basically, our vision was to go campus to campus to Christian students on secular universities and share Genesis to Revelation, the missions theme of God, and then invite them to be either a goer or a sender. And so we divided the U.S. up 22 years ago into 12 zones. And so each zone takes a semester. So to come on the traveling team staff is a 6-year commitment because that gets you around the U.S. To every major college campus, 12 zones, 1 zone a semester, 6 years. So right now we have 3 teams out. We speak at 120 universities a semester. So tonight there's a campus ministry we're speaking at Ohio. There's a campus ministry we're speaking at in Montana, and there's a campus ministry we're speaking at in Arkansas, because they're in zone 1, they're in zone 5, and they're in zone 9. Next semester, we're going to be in zone 2. We'll have a team in Texas, Louisiana. We'll have a team doing a 40-campus tour in zone 6, New England, and then we'll have a team in zone 10. And then the next semester, we'll be in zone 11, California, Arizona, New Mexico. We'll be in zone 3, and we'll be in zone 7. And so, man, it's such a privilege. I love John Mott. You're going to hear from him. You're going to hear about him today. John Mott won the Nobel Peace Prize. The one who does the work is only surpassed in value by the one who multiplies the doers, and that's what we're about. We want to mobilize laborers to reach the world. So that's the traveling team. If you're interested in like, oh my gosh, I'd love the traveling team to come and speak, we're free $99. Okay, that's how much we cost. Free $99. That's a deal. We all raise our own support like you. We have donors that give us money for van and gas and housing and all that. So if you're like, oh my gosh, that's a good deal, take my card at the book table that you're probably going to go to after this. And yeah, you can contact me, or Jay's going to send out an email to say, hey, if you want the traveling team to get your info, let us know. We just want to know. We just want you to know we're coming through, really. And some of you might be like, "Man, can I use you for our staff meetings?" Yes, we'd love to walk your staff through some of this stuff. So anyway, however you can use this is up to you. Did you like the first 300 years? Yeah. Why doesn't this work now? I'm blaming somebody. Man. Can you unplug me and plug me back in on that thing? This is tragic. It works until you're ready. Any luck? I'm going to wait this out. Is it working? Can you shoot it back up there again somehow? Do what? Tragedy fuels growth. Tragedy fuels growth. I'm not stopping. I'm going to get this thing going. We good? Give me a second. You're like, what is he doing? It'll be worth it, trust me. We got it. I don't know, man. You live by technology, you die by technology. Let's see if it keeps going. It hates this. It is the range. Here, put a chair right here. Don't walk there. Okay, there we go. We'll see. If not, I'll tell him I'll have to, you hate doing the whole click now. What are the world religions? If you think about the world religions, you've got Taoism, Judaism, Confucianism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam. Of those, only 3 of their founders before they died said, take this to all nations. There's only 3 missionary religions in the world. Siddhartha Gautama, the founder of Buddhism, before he died, said this should go to all nations. Muhammad, before he died at age 63, said this should go to all nations. And Jesus, of course, said this should go to all nations. So the only 3 missionary religions out there are Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity. Now, interesting, Buddhism has always stayed in Eastern Asia. It's never gotten outside of that. Islam can be found from Morocco to China, Algeria to Indonesia, but it's virtually non-existent like it is over there in the West. Christianity is the only religion that is as far and as broad and as wide. It's the most diverse religion in the world. And when you ask the question, how is that even possible? Like, how did it go global in scope? The answer, of course, is the last 300 years. The last 300 years. So we're going to focus on the last 300 years. We looked at the first 300. We're going to look at the last 300 because the missions enterprise really launched from England. And many of you might be familiar with some of these stories, and I hope you are. I'll be mentioning some books that I think you should buy or at least be familiar with. But William Carey, he's 17 years old when he becomes a Christ follower. And what you're going to realize is this. you're going to realize every major missions movement has been launched by 17 to 25-year-olds. Like every major missions movement has been launched by 17 to 25-year-olds. You're like the most mobilizable, sendable, teachable people on the planet. For some reason, there's something unique about that age group. And you're going to see it in history. It's really unarguable. When you look at history, every missions movement has been launched by young adults. William Carey, he's 17. He comes to Christ at a prayer meeting, and he begins to love Scripture. He teaches himself Greek and Latin. And his mentor says, Carey, I think you should be a Baptist minister. And he's like, okay, what does that entail? And they're like, well, you have to come once a month to a Baptist meeting where all the Baptists in London, you get a church and you preach. And he's like, okay, I'm in. And he began to read Matthew 28, 18 through 20. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go and make disciples of all nations. And here he is in London. No missionary has been sent, right, from Europe. Like, no one has been sent. And he's looking at Matthew 28, and he's like, man, was this for all believers, or was this just for the 11 disciples? And so, at the monthly meeting, he stands up in front of all the Baptist pastors in London. And the guy at the front of the meeting, John Ryland, who baptized Carey, says, Carey, do you have a question that you would like to share that we can discuss? And William Carey says, yes. Was Matthew 28, 18 through 20 only for the 11 disciples, or was it for all believers? And in that moment, John Ryland looks at Carey and he says this. He says, young man, sit down. When God wants to reach the heathen, he can do it without your help or mine. Now, when you think about this, you're like, oh my gosh, there's a truth to this. God wants to reach the heathen. There's an untruth. He wants to do it without our help, okay? And Carey, today if you get mad at somebody, you tweet. You know, this is pre-tweet. And so Carey, in 1792, he writes an 86-page book called An Inquiry. And matter of fact, Amazon just reprinted it. You can actually buy the book called An Inquiry. And it's 86 pages. It's 5 chapters long. Chapter 1 is the Great Commission for all believers. And he lays out why he thinks it is. Chapters 2, 3, and 4 are what the world looks like, how many Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, and how we can reach them. And chapter 5 is how every Christian needs to participate. And then Carey does the unthinkable. He tells his congregation, I'm going to sail to London. There are 23 national languages in India, and not one of them have a Bible. And I am going to help with Bible poverty. He takes his wife and his 4 kids, and they sail 5 months and 10 days. That same journey today is 7 hours with 27 flight options. He sails 5 months and 10 days. He lands in Calcutta, India, and immediately his world starts to spiral downward. His 5-year-old son dies. No Hindu would help dig a hole or bury the son for fear of karma. So his own wife had to carry her dead son and put him in a ground. She went mentally insane, Dorothy Carey. She never recovered from that. Most of his translation got burned up in a fire. After 7 years, he finally is able to baptize his first convert. His name is Krishna Pal. And as he's baptizing Krishna Pal in the Ganges River, when he brings Krishna Pal up out of the water, on one side of the Ganges is his wife in a straitjacket, mentally insane. And on the other side of the Ganges is his co-partner in handcuffs being arrested for embezzling all the money Carey raised from England. But he just kept doing the hard things. Every day he was a plotter. I have to do this. He never returned to England. 45 years he spent in India. And at the time he died, he had translated the Bible into the language of 300 million people. 300 million people now have Scripture. And before he died, he made it plain as possible what he wanted on his tombstone. He says, I want my funeral to be as plain as possible. I want the following inscription and nothing more cut on the stone. And of course, you can read from the stone himself. A wretched, poor, and helpless worm, on thy kind arms I fall. A wretched, poor, and helpless worm, on thy kind arms I fall. Carey got missions going in England. But who started missions in America? Who's the founding fathers of missions in America? Well, to find that out, you got to go to the college campus. You got to go to the college campus. You got to go to Williams College in Williamstown, Massachusetts. 1806. So Carey sailed in 1792. So 1806 at Williams College in Williamstown, Massachusetts, there was a freshman named Samuel Mills. And Samuel Mills, he had a heart for Asia, which is weird because in 1806, we hadn't even founded Mississippi yet, okay? And here he is going, Asia, Asia. And it's like, Asia? Mississippi, And so he gets a copy of Carey's book, but he doesn't get just one, he gets 5. And in this field off a campus called Sloan's Meadow at Williams College in Williamstown, Massachusetts, him and 4 other guys start to read Carey's book. First page of Carey's book. They open it up. To know God's will, you need 2 things. They're reading. Carey says, to know God's will, you need 2 things. An open Bible and an open map. So they open their Bible and they open a map of the world and they keep reading in Carey's book. And all of a sudden, it starts to rain and hail and lightning, and they're freaking out. They're like, we can't run back to campus. It's raining and hailing too much. And so what do? We have to tuck under a haystack. So cows would eat the base of a haystack, so they would tuck underneath the haystack, and it's raining and hailing and lightning, and all 5 guys are like, we're going to die single. They're freaking out, okay? It stops raining. They come out from the haystack, and Samuel Mills, the leader, the freshman of these 5 guys, says this, men, how many missionaries has America sent? And of course, the answer was 0. How many mission agencies are there in America? 0. If in 1806, if you wanted to be a missionary, you had to sail to England, become a good member of that church, then go with the London Missionary Society with Carey. We didn't even have a mission agency. And from these 5 guys in that field, underneath the haystack, God starts 6 mission agencies. 6. Samuel Mills graduates, goes to Andover Seminary, and pleads with pastors, don't go to the pulpit, board the ships. And in 1812, the first missionary sailed from Salem, Massachusetts. His name was Adoniram Judson and his wonderful wife, Anne. And they sail from Salem, Massachusetts, and they joined William Carey in Calcutta. Samuel Mills took trips back and forth to Africa. He starts the American Bible Society, and on a trip back from Africa, setting up mission stations, he falls sick on the boat. And for fear that whatever he had would fall through the rest of the cabin, they took his dead body and threw it overboard. The founding father of American missions, there's no place you can go to see his grave. Every one of our kids, we wanted to namesake their middle name after someone who would become their hero. So their middle name is who he namesaked after. And so I have a 13-year-old son, and his name is Brody Mills. And above his bed it reads, we will not rest until God's glory is felt to the remotest parts of the earth. Samuel Mills. Man, Carey gets the ball started. Samuel Mills at the haystack, he says, guys, whose fault is it that we haven't sent a missionary? It's not God's fault, it's our fault. And his statement to his dying breath was, we can do this if we will. We can do this if we will. We can do this if we will. Jump back over to England. You have a 15-year-old named Hudson Taylor. His parents were away on vacation for one weekend. This is pre-Xbox. He was bored, and so he wandered into his father's library. He picked up a book called the Gospels, and it was a chronological order of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and the events that happened. He reads it, and he gets converted in his dad's library. He then goes to church on Sunday. He meets with the pastor, and he says to the pastor, where should I go? What should I do in life? And the pastor's like, how do I know? Pastor's like, I don't know. Here, read this book. And he hands him a book called China's Spiritual Needs. And Taylor reads it. And the conclusion of the book is this: go to med school, become a doctor, and move to China. Like, that was what the book was asking people to do. I mean, talk about specific. I mean, you're like, well, okay, God. So Taylor's like, I got to go to med school. I got to become a doctor. I got to move to China. He lands in China. He sails in China in 1865, okay? So we're 60 years past the haystack in America. 1865, he sails to China. He's there for 4 years. And after 4 years, he's like, this is a complete waste of time. Like, this is a complete waste of time. Why is it a complete waste of time? He's like, because the mission agency that he went with forbid him to learn Mandarin. He had to teach the Chinese English, then share the gospel in English. The mission agency he went with forbid him to live with the Chinese. He had to live with the other English on a compound. The mission agency he went with forbid him to dress like the Chinese. He had to dress European. He had to wear the top hats and tails. He's like, I'm going back to China. I'm going back to England, and I need to recruit more people. He fell sick. He needed to go home for rest. And just before he was to sail back to England, a Buddhist businessman comes to Christ. And as Taylor's meeting with him, the Buddhist businessman asked Taylor a question. Taylor, how long has the gospel been in England? Hundreds of years. England's had the gospel for hundreds of years. The Buddhist businessman said, my father tried to find hope in Taoism, Buddhism, and Confucianism, but didn't. He died without finding it. Why did you not come sooner? And that haunted Taylor. On the boat ride back to England, he pulls out his Bible, and in the margin on the front page, he writes 24. God, give me 24 missionaries, 2 from every province of China. He mobilizes 16 to go back with him. And he founds an organization. Today it's called OMF, Overseas Missionary Fellowship. He will spend the majority of his life in China, 55 years. The only way you could get him back to England is if you gave him college students to speak to. That's the only reason he came back. He's like, will you give me college students to speak to? I'll come back. He made one trip to America. And at the end of his life, he says this, if I had 1,000 lives, I'd give every one of them to China. If I had 1,000 lives, I'd give every one of them to China. And your students, think about what they're giving their life for. Do you know the number one determining factor of what the mass amount of students in your ministry will do after college? Do you know what the number one factor is? The number one factor of what determines the students in your ministry when they graduate and leave, the number one factor in what they do next is this: who pays the most? They're following the money. These are Christian students that you've discipled. But they're like, well, I want the money. And that comma after the zero is so enticing. And then you come along and say, hey, you could raise support. Give yourself to making disciples. Ask 100 of your friends for money. You should consider that. Taylor's like, he was the first to formulate, we want to live off support. Before this, the denominations paid. But for Taylor, he's like, I got no denomination behind me. And so he lived off support his whole life. Think about that. A person heavily influenced by Taylor. Taylor died in 1905. John Sung was born in 1901 in the province that Taylor had worked in most of his life. John Sung, though, was a Taoist. He was not a Christ follower. He's from a poor farming family, okay? And he tells his dad, he's like, Dad, I want to study in America. And his dad's like, I don't even have money for the boat ride. Like, forget you studying in America. Through a crazy fortune of events, him and his 6 friends get a scholarship to Ohio State University. And literally, like, here he is, he's a Taoist, and he's so excited. He comes to campus at Ohio State, and he gets finished with his undergrad and his master's really quickly. He wants to be a doctor, so he gets his PhD in chemistry. And he's so quick to being done. and all of a sudden, the further he gets to, the closer he gets to graduation, the more it's like, man, I thought like degrees would fill the void. Like, I thought this would make me happy. And he begins to spiral downward in depression. And his academic advisor is like, Sung, are you okay? He's like, I'm okay. He's like, no, you're not okay. He's like, I'm okay. He's like, no, you're not okay. And the academic advisor starts to get nervous for Sung. In Columbus, Ohio, he gets invited to church. He says he goes out of curiosity. On stage, he doesn't know what to expect. On stage, before the pastor gets up, a 15-year-old girl gives her testimony. And she talks about Matthew 24 and the resurrection. He goes home, back to his dorm. He borrows a Bible from a friend. He reads Luke 24 all night. In the morning, he feels like God says, son, your sins are forgiven. He begins to run around campus shouting. He shares the gospel across campus. His academic advisor now thinks he's gone insane. Unbeknownst to Sung, his academic advisor checked him into an insane asylum in Columbus, Ohio. He tried to escape twice, but they caught him both times. He was given his Bible, and that's it. 194 days. He read his Bible through 40 times, 7 hours and 23 minutes a day. He calls it his desert experience. And on day 194, his academic advisor shows up, and he says, please let me out. His academic advisor says, I will let you out if you finish your doctorate quickly and then sail back to Shanghai. He does. He changes his name in the insane asylum from John Sung to John Sung, wanting to be, as John the Baptist, wanting to be the forerunner to China with the gospel. As he lands in Shanghai, the boat docks. The only proof he has that he got his degrees are the 3 scrolls, his undergrad, his master's, and his doctorate. And he takes his undergrad and he drops it overboard. And he takes his master's and he drops it overboard. And he takes his doctorate and he says, I got to show my dad, and then I'm going to burn it. He marries. He has 5 kids: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Joshua. From age 23 to 41, he travels China, Malaysia, Vietnam, Burma, and Singapore, planting churches. Dies at 41 of tuberculosis. Leslie T. Lyle just wrote the biography of John Sung. It's called A Flame for God in the Far East. First page. First paragraph. John Sung is the greatest evangelist China's ever seen. So, 3 years ago, we land in China. On the flight there, I grabbed A Flame for God in the Far East, put it in my bag, read it on the flight there. We get to Beijing, go in an hour to an orphanage, and I get a chance to meet my son. We adopted a little boy from China. Stand before the judge in Beijing, and he says, what do you want to name him? And I said, Noble Sung Errand. What was John's to begin, prayerfully will be Noble's to complete. For a servant of God to have authority in every sentence he utters, he must first suffer for the message he is to deliver. Remember, tragedy is the growth of the gospel. Without great tribulation, there is no great illumination. Well, go back to Ireland, college campus. Amy Carmichael, she's a student in college, but guess what? At age 10, she's from a well-to-do family in Ireland. At age 10, her mother would take her to get tea and treats after service at her favorite tea shop. She would get dressed up. She would go to church. They would go have tea. They had her favorite seat by the window. She's sitting by the window with her mother. She looks out the window, and she sees on the other side of the window a 10-year-old girl. Basically herself mirrored, but this 10-year-old girl is an orphan. Distraught, dirty, rags, hungry, trauma. And at age 10, Amy Carmichael goes home. And at age 10, she pens a poem. When I grow up and money have, I know just what I'll do. I'll build a great big lovely place for little girls like you. In college, she hears Hudson Taylor. She goes to Taylor and says, where do you want me? He says, I need you in Japan. We are trying to get women missionaries to Japan. She decides to go. She sails to Japan. She's there for 16 months until she realizes the only thing on planet Earth she's allergic to is the national flower of Japan. She breaks out in hives. She breaks out in sweats. She has these fevers. She can't learn the difficult language. I mean, to many of us, we'd be like, I'm called to go back home. You know, this is the Lord's will. I need to go home. But then she hears a need in India. The Hindu priests are kidnapping little girls, and they're selling them into temple prostitution. And there's no one to rescue them and house them and train them and give the gospel. So Amy leaves Japan. She sails around China, through the Philippines. She sails around Malaysia and Vietnam and Singapore. She goes up around the coast of India and up all the way to Mumbai, where she will spend the next 25 years of her life. Never married, no kids of her own. She rescues these little girls out of Hindu prostitution, trains them and gives them the gospel. The last decade of her life, she fell through the second floor and broke her back, and she was bedridden. But good for us, because that's when she wrote her 21 books. Her most famous, Things As They Are, available on Amazon. Things As They Are. A girl wrote Amy Carmichael. There's only 2 pictures of Amy Carmichael, by the way. There's only 2. We only have 2. A girl wrote Amy Carmichael, Miss Carmichael, what's it like to be a missionary? And Amy Carmichael wrote back, being a missionary is simply a chance to die. Elizabeth Elliot, when she wrote the biography of Amy Carmichael, she titled it, A Chance to Die. And just before Amy Carmichael was to die, she said, I want my tombstone to not even say my name. It was never about me, but I want it to be a place that waters. And so right behind the orphanage, they put her tombstone in the shape of a bird bath and one word on it and one word only. The word they put on there was Amma, or mother in Tamil. Mother. Another person heavily impacted by Hudson Taylor. By the way, we have an 8-year-old daughter. Her name is Quincy Carmichael. And our hope is that she will get a chance to go to India and work in that orphanage and give her life to what her namesake gave her life to. Another influential person impacted by Hudson Taylor was C.T. Studd. Isn't that a great name? You're at Panera Bread. Last name, please, Studd. I didn't name it, I just live it, you know. C.T. Studd. C.T. Studd, he was a household name by his sophomore year. He went to Cambridge College in Cambridge, England, and by his sophomore year, he was captain of the cricket team. Not only was he captain of the cricket team, but they won the national championship, and they were world champions of cricket. They were singing Studd's name in the streets. The Queen of England wanted to have tea with C.T. Studd. And Hudson Taylor comes to Cambridge, and he speaks at the large group meeting that C.T. Studd's there. He's going to go pro. He's going to go pro in being a cricket player. And Hudson Taylor, he comes up to Hudson Taylor afterwards, and he's like, what should I give my life for? And Hudson Taylor says, give up your small ambitions and go east. The major recruiters for the pro teams were like, Studd, you're going to die of malaria in 6 months in China. Or you can have all the accolades of professional cricketing here. He not only said, I'm not going to be a professional cricket player, he ended up recruiting 6 other cricket players in England to go with him. They're like, what? Every newspaper in England and America was talking about the Cambridge 7. Everyone was talking about the Cambridge 7. They're CT. And just before they are to set sail for China, something happens. C.T. Studd's father dies. Well, C.T. Studd's younger brother, he had an older brother named J.K. Studd. He had a younger brother named George Studd, and he had one sister named Ima. Just before they were to sail, J.K. Studd went to America to recruit missionaries. George Studd was too sick to help anybody do anything, and Edward Studd, the father, dies, leaving him with the widowed mother. Even J.K.'s like, Studd, you got to stay and care for mother. You got to stay and care for mother. And C.T. Studd would not have it. He's like, I've got to go to China. He says, I've got to go to China. He says this. C.T. Studd was convinced that God was calling him to China. At first, he was hesitant because of his widowed mother. Even his older brother, a faithful Christian, tried to persuade him not to go. C.T. prayed and prayed until God gave him a word. A man's enemies are the men of his own house. Charles Thomas Studd was going to China as a missionary. I tell every college student I speak to this. Every college student I speak to, I say this. The greatest obstacles in your life, share your last name. They're your family, your siblings, your mom and your dad. Those are going to be the greatest obstacles to keeping you to obeying God. Your parents want your best. Don't settle for your parents' best. That's too small. Settle for God's best. I tell every student I talk to that. Man, I just checked. It's available on Amazon. Norman Grubb is the son-in-law of C.T. Studd, and he wrote the biography of C.T. Studd. It's called C.T. Studd, Cricketer and Pioneer. It's $12.99. It's my first biography I ever recommend. C.T. Studd, Cricketer and Pioneer. I read it my sophomore year of college with a yellow highlighter. Can I show you some things I highlighted? Had I cared for the comments of people, I would have never been a missionary. If Jesus Christ be God and died for me, then no sacrifice can be too great for me to make for him. Some wish to live within the sound of a chapel bell, but I want to run a rescue shop within a yard of hell. I have a 7-year-old son. His name is Cruz Studd. My wife and I, we were in London, and I was looking at a map, and I was like, Jess, 80 miles north of London is Cambridge. So we hopped on a train, we went up there, and I was at Cambridge College. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. This is epic. I mean, I was like taking selfies. I was like, Jess, this is probably, we went to the computer lab. I was like, this is probably where C.T. Studd emailed his application to Taylor. Like, this is the computer. I went to the Pepsi machine. I'm like, he probably got popped, paid his credit card and got popped right here. But basically, afterwards, my wife's like, hey, what do you want to commemorate? What do you want to commemorate your time at Cambridge? Sticker, thermos, shirt. And I don't know why I thought that. I don't know where I got this idea, but I was like, I don't want any of that. And in God's goodness, across the street from the campus was an antique store. And I walk into the antique store, and I say, hey, do you have any like old 1800 cricket balls? And they're like, yeah, we got a stack in the back. And so I got a cricket ball, tattered leather cricket ball, and it's on my desk. And it reminds me, God is looking for our cricket ball. Your cricket ball is different than my cricket ball. Students in your ministry have different cricket balls. For some, they want that fat paycheck. For some, they want to be married by 28. For some, they want the resume. For some, they want to live close to family. For some, they want purpose. For some, you name it. But God's looking for your cricket ball. C.T. Studd gave up his cricket ball. He went to China for 10 years, India for 8 years, and Africa for 21 years. Think about that. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So, to recap, we've got William Carey in England, 1792, gets the ball moving. Then we have Samuel Mills, Haystack Prayer Meeting, 1806, American College campus. Then we have Taylor and Sung and Carmichael and Studd. Now we go back to England and we go back to America. And the YMCA, what a strategic group. The YMCA was like, hey, we got to reach college students. And they're like, we do. We need to reach college students. And so they're like, hey, Luther, you're a part of the YMCA. Why don't you be the college pastor of the YMCA? The first campus minister in America was Luther Wishart. He was challenged by the YMCA to do the Collegiate YMCA, okay? And so to be a part of the YMCA Collegiate edition, you had to be between 18 and 22. You had to be a man, and you had to be a college student. So you had to be 18 to 22, you had to be a male, and you had to be a college student. And he went campus to campus all across America by train, and he would gather these students into small groups that were guys, and they would teach them to pray and read their Bibles and share their faith. Well, on one of the train rides, he picks up a magazine called the Missionary Review of the World, and on page 6, he hears a story. The story goes like this. This is what he's reading on the train. 1806. He's like, okay, so 80 years earlier. Williams College, 5 guys, a haystack, a prayer meeting, birthed American missions. Literally, he gets out his itinerary, and he's like, Williams College? I'll be there in February. I'm visiting the campus in February. In February of 1806, Luther Wishart gets on campus at Williams College. Between the dorms and the cafeteria is this monument. I took that picture. It's 12 feet tall. You can see it today. On the top is a globe. In the middle is a haystack. Across the top, Birth of American Missions. Underneath, 5 names with Samuel Mills at the first. And Luther Wishart gets on his knees in February of 1886 in Williamstown and Williams College, and he says this. He says, God, I don't know what you did 80 years ago, but do it again. Of course, he said it more eloquent. Where water once flowed, let it flow again. I don't laugh at you. I don't. I've not laughed at you once. And then he says this. He says, Lord, he says, it starts with me. It starts with me, right? He says, I have to be willing to go anywhere at any time and do anything for you. And then he has an idea that will change American missions for the next 50 years. And then he has an idea that will change American missions for the next 50 years. He says, I'm on all these campuses. I have access to all these campuses. He says, I'm going to invite 2 students from every campus. They have to be men, and they have to be juniors or seniors, because I want them to be, or they have to be freshmen or sophomores, because I want them to be able to go back to their campus. If they're seniors and graduating, it's not going to help me. So he decides to have a summer project. This is the power of LTs, by the way. We see it in the inception, okay? God changes lives during summers. I'm sorry, it's just where he does it, okay? It's not my idea, it's just what happens, okay? Get behind these LT. The first LT changed missions history. Think about it. This is the first LT. He spends from February to June. February to June. I mean, that's not long. He recruits 251 students from 89 campuses. No seniors, no juniors. But he telegraphs his best friend. He's like, hey, Moody, I need you to come speak. I want you to speak on Matthew from 9 to noon every day. Moody's like, well, I will, but where are you going to have this thing? He's like, that's the thing. We don't have a place yet. Our LT is without a home. He says, well, hey, let's have it at my boarding school. My boarding school is in Mount Hermon, Massachusetts. It's about 100 miles east of Williams College. And that's where Moody was born. That's where Moody's buried today. And it's where Moody went every summer. He's like, all the kids are going to be gone, so we'll have all the dorms. But Luther Wishart knows for this movement to happen, he needs mobilizers. But where do you find a mobilizer? Well, he goes to Princeton University, his alma mater. He goes to Princeton University, and he knocks on the door of Robert Wilder. He knocks on the door of Robert Wilder. Robert, yes. Are you a senior? Yes. Did you found the Princeton Students for Foreign Missions? Yes. Are you sailing to India in May? Yes. Are you taking 27 students with you? Yes. I need you for a summer. No. I'm not delaying sailing. You're the only senior I'm inviting. I have 251 students from 89 campuses. I need you, the master mobilizer. Will you please come and mobilize? He says, I can't delay. So Luther Wishart takes a train to Mount Holyoke School for Girls, and he knocks on the door of Robert's sister, Grace, who's a senior also, and he says, Grace, I need your brother there. I need your brother there. And Grace said, I'm sending a telegraph right now. I held the telegraph at Yale Archives. I have a copy of the telegraph. I've memorized the telegraph. My dearest Robert, it is worth delaying 4 weeks, even 4 years, for this could be the mighty missions movement we've been praying for. If you go, I will stay home and care for ailing father, and I will pray that of the 251, 100 would be long-term cross-cultural foreign missionaries. Sincerely, G. Period. He went. He went. Moody takes the stage. Grace takes to prayer back in Princeton. And Robert starts mobilizing. After the first week, he had 25 committed. Second week, 56. Third week, 89. Last day of the conference, he said, if you want to be a long-term cross-cultural foreign missionary, meet in front of the chapel. We're going to pin a number on you, have you sign the year you graduate, the date you're going to sail, and the country you're going to. It was exactly 100. It's called the Mount Hermon 100. You can see Wishart. You can see the numbers pinned on them. Mark 16:15, go and preach the gospel to all creation was their mantra. You would think Luther's like, are you kidding me? This is incredible, 100? But he remembered how many women weren't invited, how many juniors and seniors weren't invited. So he asked for 2 volunteers. He said, I need 2 volunteers to go campus to campus, by train, casting vision, sharing the biblical basis of missions, and challenging students to get on board. And in 1887, the first traveling team was birthed as Robert Wilder and John Foreman agreed to travel by train. From 1886 to 1887, Robert Wilder and John Foreman traveled to 177 campuses, and they mobilized 2,106 students to go. Let me just put that in perspective so that you drop your jaw a little bit. In 1886, in all of America's history, we'd only sent 1,900 missionaries. That means in 1 year, from 1886 to 1887, Robert Wilder and John Foreman doubled the missions force. In 1 year, they doubled it. That's the power of working with the demographic we work with. In 1 year, they doubled the missions force. In 1 year, they doubled the missions force. Robert Wilder, at the end of that year, said, Luther, I'm leaving. I'm going to India. And Luther's like, well, you can't until you do 2 things. He's like, what? You got to replace yourself, because this thing's a movement. You got to replace yourself, and you got to name this thing. He says, okay. Well, Foreman and I have just been calling it the Student Volunteer Movement, the SVM. Because one girl was like, I don't know if I'm called or not, but I'm sure there's a guy that was called that disobeyed, so I'll volunteer in his place. So Foreman's like, let's just call it the SVM. Students are volunteering, and it's a movement, so they called it the SVM. Well, who do you want to replace yourself? Oh, man. Are you joking? Number 23, Massachusetts Mott. Who's Massachusetts Mott? He was the 23rd signer of the Mount Hermon 100. He's on track to be governor. He wants to be governor when he graduates. He raised enough money to build a chapel on campus at Cornell University. They called it Mott Auditorium. They're like, go get Massachusetts Mott. The way Massachusetts Mott even got to the meeting was this. J.K. Stud, CT's brother, was over from England to America preaching at a YMCA. John Mott shows up late. 20-year-old Mott walked in. Young man, are you seeking great things for yourself? Seek them not. Seek first the kingdom of God. He woke up. He met with J.K. Stud. J.K. Stud said, you need to be at the Mount Hermon LT Summer Institute. You need to go. He's like, I'll go. He gets mobilized by Robert Wilder as they're swimming in the river, talking about Latin. Don't ask me. And He gets mobilized by Wilder. He's the 23rd. He ends up leading the student volunteer movement after he graduates for 41 years. He crosses the Atlantic over 100 times. He raises $300 million for world evangelization. In 1946, President Harry Truman awarded John Armand the Nobel Peace Prize. During the student volunteer movement, 1 out of every 37 university students were mobilized. Over 100,000 goers and senders. The most mobilizable people on the planet are university students. Now, I had read Mott's biography. And I knew he's buried in the Washington Cathedral. He's buried in the Washington Cathedral because he won the Nobel Peace Prize. He's next to Helen Keller. But there's no picture of Mott's burial. You cannot find it. So a friend of mine named Spencer was going to D.C. I said, Spencer, you're going to D.C. I said, hey, listen, let's go National Treasure. I said, listen, I'm going to Washington Cathedral next to Helen Keller, get a picture of John Mott's grave, and I will Venmo you $100. When I get the text, I'm Venmoing you $100. Sushi on me in D.C. Well, when Spencer gets to D.C., guess where he goes? He doesn't go to the Capitol. No. He doesn't go to the White House. No. Where does he go? Cathedral. Walks into the cathedral, camera in hand. Goes up to the desk. Excuse me, where's Mott's grave? Oh, it's downstairs. He takes off walking. The lady says, excuse me. He's like, yeah. She goes, do you have FBI clearance? He says, no. She says, oh, to go downstairs, you need FBI clearance. Spencer looks at this lady and says, if I Venmo you $50, will you go downstairs and take a picture? Ladies and gentlemen, the only known picture. He served the Lord with vision, a witness to the wideness of God's glory. Across the world, he stood for Christian peace. A leader of youth, he strove. If any man be in Christ, is a new creation. Old things have passed away. We have a 12-year-old son. His name is Axel Mott. And above Axel's bed, it reads this: radical decisions and choices are the founding fathers of my life. Can I now waver? But you know what? When historians look back at what happened at 23rd and Madison at New York City, the headquarters of the SVM, when historians look back at what happened at 23 Madison Avenue in New York City, how did this movement grow? When they look at who started it, they don't point to Mott or Moody or Robert or Luther. When historians point back, they point to a female who believed in visioneering in her brother's life, who believed in the power of prayer, and after she graduated from Mount Holyoke, sailed to India, never married, where she's buried today. They attribute it to Grace Wilder. When she died, they had a commemoration for her in New York City. I have what they handed out to every person who entered. I have the commemoration. It says, in honor of Grace Wilder, the mother of the student volunteer movement. I have a 15-year-old daughter. Her name is Camden Wilder. Ironically, no one's ever heard of Grace Wilder. We're familiar with her aunt, Laura Ingle Wilder, but we're not familiar with Grace. The power of the university student. Can I do one more? I know you've been in here so long. Give me one more. PowerPoint didn't work, okay? Give me one more. Hey, is this clicker on fire? Huh? Is this on fire? Can I have one more? Jay, can I have one more? Jay, I got one more and then a little surprise, okay? I got one more and then a surprise. It's 6:17. I'm going to need till 6:21, okay? I got one more than a surprise. I was at Merritt's Coffee for 2 hours, and I thought of something. I thought, this is my conclusion. I said, I'm going to conclude with this. And so whatever you're going to hear at the conclusion is something thought of at Merritt's next door when I got my refill, okay? So just know, I've not shared what I'm sharing. My conclusion has not been shared with anyone ever. You're the first, okay? So, Jay, I'm going to get through this next one, and then I'm going to share my conclusion, okay? And guess what? My conclusion, he doesn't know what's coming, okay? I barely know, okay? Every missions movement was launched by university students. A 19-year-old at Occidental College in California, in Los Angeles, California, heard about an opportunity to sell Bibles in Guatemala. He takes a summer and goes there. He ends up selling Bibles. One boy, a 12-year-old boy or so, comes up to him, and he asks him, he says, hey, how smart is your God? And Cameron Townsend's like, my God's all smart. And he's like, your God's all smart? He says, yeah. He says, if your God's all smart, why doesn't he speak my language? You handed me a Spanish Bible. I don't read Spanish. I read Cocky Cow. Can you give me the Cocky Cow Bible? There is no Cocky Cow Bible. In his junior year of college, Townsend says, I'm not returning to school until the Cocky Cow has a New Testament. Let me say that again. I'm not returning to college until the Cocky Cow has a New Testament. It took him a lot longer than he thought, 11 years. Okay? It took him 11 years. After 11 years, he gives the Cocky Cow the New Testament. And then he's like, oh my gosh, Mexico has 51 languages in Bible poverty. You know, Peru has 27 languages with no Bible. And he's like, there's no school in America that gives you a degree in linguistics. He says, I've got to figure something out. I got to train language. I can't do this by myself. So he has a summer project in America where he trains translators. He had 12 show up the first summer. Then he had 15, then he had 20, and he starts sending them out to be translators in these unreached people groups. And after year 4, he's like, man, we need like a name of our ministry because like people are raising money and giving it to us. So he's like, who translated the Bible into English? Oh, John Wycliffe. Okay. We're going to call ourselves Wycliffe Bible Translators. He says this. He says this. He says, the greatest missionary is the Bible in the mother tongue. It needs no furlough and is never considered a foreigner. Think about that. At 72, when most people at 72 are looking for vegetable gardens and golf carts, Townsend's like, Russia! His wife's like, Russia! There's 182 languages in Bible poverty in Russia. He learns Russian. He sends a letter to the consulate in Houston. I need a visa to go to Russia. Russia consulate denied. Denies him a visa at 72. He writes the consulate. They said, denied, wait till next year. He writes the consulate, dearest consulate, at 72, I might not have it next year. They go, okay. He dies in Russia. He dies in Russia. Sorry. If you're in Waxhaw, North Carolina, and you're like, I want to go see Cameron's tombstone, his own tombstone can mobilize you. Dear ones, by love, serve one another. Finish the task. Translate the scriptures into every language. There's still 1,800 languages in Bible poverty, 0 scriptures. Wycliffe last year celebrated their 500th New Testament. Is that incredible? The most mobilizable people on planet Earth, university students. Unarguable. Every missions movement was launched by university students. Jason Gardner, a friend of mine from college, he founded the Mobilization Index. I met with him over quinoa, and I'm like, Jason, what is the Mobilization Index? Like, I've never even heard of it. He's like, well, the Mobilization Index is this. There's 217 countries in the world. I have taken the top 60 with at least 1 million evangelical Christians. And then I've studied each of the 60, and I've decided which ones are the most mobilizable. There's factors. How close are you to unreached people groups? How healthy is your church? How much money does your church have? How much diversity is in your country? Like, do you come across Muslims, Buddhists, and Hindus? How well is your training? How many mission agencies does your country have? So I'm like, are you joking? You've researched the top 60 nations with 1 million Christians or more, and you've decided which ones are the most mobilizable? He's like, yeah. So over quinoa. I'm like, okay, Jason. Brazil. He's like, oh, Brazil, yes. 50 million Christians in Brazil, 50 million. You can mobilize openly in the churches. We can put on mission conferences in the city. The problem is there's no Muslims, Buddhists, or Hindus for Brazilians to meet to get a heart to then go. It's very difficult to mobilize Brazilians because to meet a Muslim, Buddhist, or a Hindu, you actually have to fly to the Muslim, Buddhist, or Hindu world. They're just so homogenous in Brazil. I was like, okay. Nigeria. He's like, Nigeria. He's like 50 million Christians in Nigeria as well. I'm like, are you joking? He's like, no. Nigeria's dirt poor. They have 95 mission agencies. None of them are sending anyone. Why? There's no money in the Nigerian church. No one's going anywhere from Nigeria. Indonesia has 14 million Christians, 14 million. Proximity-wise, there's 71 unreached people groups even within their own country. But you can't mobilize them. They're so scared. The government clamps down. In churches, they were wearing masks before COVID. China has 100 million Christians. 100 million Christians. No sending agency, no training agency, no support system. They're going nowhere fast. Well, Jason, who's the most mobilizable country on the planet? Ladies and gentlemen, you are ministers to the most mobilizable age group in America, in the most mobilizable country in the world. You are ministers to the most mobilizable age group in the most mobilizable country on planet Earth. And so, Father, I pray that we would be concerned with the sending capacity as well as the seating capacity of our churches. I pray as these wonderful ministers get back on campus that they would raise up workers to your harvest, that we would be a people who are involved in your mission with clarity, moving out, releasing workers into the harvest as goers and senders. In your name, amen.
Yeah, let's do this. Go ahead and stand on up. I know that everyone's probably pretty tired. Y'all have probably taken in a lot today, but I just encourage all of us that we would meet with the Lord our God and that we would experience his presence. I know yesterday, Jay's talk, that we would be a movement that we would be before we try and do. And I pray that whatever God has been speaking to you during this time, that we would meet him in that place tonight.
walking around these walls. I thought by now they'd fall, but you have never failed me yet. Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won, for you have never failed me yet. Your promise still stands, great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands, this is my confidence, you never fail me yet. I know the night won't last, your word will come to pass. My heart will sing your praise again. Jesus, you're still enough. Keep me within your love. Hey, my heart will sing your praise again. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me. Yeah, oh, your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. Still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me. Yeah. still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me. Spirit was moving over the water. Spirit, come move over us. Come rest on us. Come rest on us. Like the Spirit was moving over the water. Spirit, come move over us. Come rest on us. Come rest on us. Like the Spirit was moving over the water. Spirit, come move over us. Come rest on us. Come rest on us. Like the Spirit was moving over the water. Spirit, come move over us. Come rest on us. Come rest on us. Come down. Spirit, when you move, you make my heart pound. When you fill the room, come rest on us. Come rest on us. Come down. Spirit, when you move, you make my heart pound. When you fill the room, come rest on us. Come rest on us.
Jesus, we love you. Oh, how we love you. You are the one our hearts adore. Jesus, we love you. Oh, how we love you. y'all can take a seat.
All right, can you guys say thank you to the worship team? Can you give a hand for them? Thank you all. Thank you so much. Can we also thank Todd for coming out and speaking with us? Can you give him a hand? He's leaving after tonight, so like he said, his books are out there and you can buy them. And I don't know if you heard how many kids he has, but there's a lot. So do them a favor and buy some books, learn something. Let's see, what else is there? Oh, the YMCA reps are here. So if you're thinking about checking out, going out there, staffing LT this summer, or you have some questions about the YMCA so you can invite students to that better, really want to encourage you. They came all the way out here, so please go say hi. At the very least, welcome them. Show them some hospitality. We can all do that. The diversity/BIPOC lunch is tomorrow in the gym, a reminder for that. And for tomorrow morning, a reminder that there is a leadership meeting at 8 a.m. I don't know where that is, Jay. Do you want to say if that's here? Anyone? Man, Jay's not even in the room anymore. That's how. Let's see. That's around here. So leadership team meeting. If you're staff level 4 through 6, that's for you. Sorry, what? In the loft. Thank you. Levels 4 through 6, that meeting's for you. Levels 1 through 3, might I suggest you are the most likely to be in the ages of 17 to 25. Maybe you should get together and pray and start a missional movement. Have a great night, everyone.